Hello, I am Tammy Marshall. Today, instead of sharing with you some of my fiction like I normally do, I want to share with you a blog post. I write a couple blogs and some newsletters and some other things. I will share a link in the comment section to my author website where you can, you can find all the different things I've written, including my books. But I started this blog called Shtick This quite a few years ago to be sort of a smartass blog, but it's evolved over the years. It's not necessarily all smartass. In fact, sometimes it's kind of serious, like the one I wrote yesterday. So this one is basically called Putting Me First. And now I've written this blog for a long time. And in it, I've written a few times now about my life after my divorce. And since I write about my divorce quite a bit, some people mistakenly think that I'm dwelling on it, as if I either regret it or that I just can't get beyond it. Now, neither of those could be farther from the truth. I dwell on it, or as I like to think of it, I talk about it because it was a momentous decision and a huge turning point in my life. Like one where you go from deep, dark shadow and you turn into bright, illuminating light. So I dwell upon my divorce because it was the very best thing I've ever done for myself. Now, as a woman, and more specifically as a mother, many people assume that the two best things I've ever done in my life are my two children. And while they are correct to a certain extent, they're also incorrect. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my children dearly, and they know that. I mean, I love them so much. I'm very proud of them. But children grow up. They leave, they get on with their own lives. The one and only constant in your life is yourself. And the one and only constant in my life is myself. I am the only person I can count on, trust, believe in, and live with for the extent of my life. So the things I do that will impact me on a daily basis for the rest of my life are the things that matter. Thus, the two very best decisions I've ever made in my entire life so far were to get divorced and to leave teaching. Both of these decisions seem kind of negative. After all, they involved me leaving things that I'd invested a lot of time and energy into. I was married for over 20 years, and I taught for 30. Walking away from either of those things was not an easy decision. In fact, I stewed about those decisions for years before I ever acted upon them. But I knew that my life away from my husband and then away from teaching would be so much better because, I was utterly miserable in my marriage. And then I was unhappy as a teacher, especially in the later years of it. Since leaving teaching last May to focus solely on my writing, I've spoken to a number of book groups at libraries and other places. Primarily, my audience members have been women. And those women have primarily been middle-aged or older. Now, even though I go to these events to talk about the books I've written, I also share my writing journey, which includes my divorce and my decision to quit teaching. Inevitably, at least one woman will come up to me afterwards and she will tell me how much she admires what I'm doing. And she doesn't really mean that I'm writing books. No. She admires that I've stepped away from an unhappy and unfulfilling conventional life to go after my dreams. And that I had the nerve to do it, even though it took me a long time to gather up that nerve. While the divorce was the pivotal point of my life, leaving teaching has allowed me to truly pursue my writing dreams. When I was trying to decide whether or not to leave teaching a little over a year ago, I happened to be listening to the radio while driving. And I heard a woman share a story of her mother encouraging her to go after her dreams. Now, I'm sorry, I wish I remembered more specifics about that woman and her dreams, but I don't. What I do remember very vividly, though, was that her mother used the motivational expression of, if not you, then who, with her. Now, it's a commonly used motivational expression, but one that I hadn't heard before, or perhaps I hadn't heard it at a time in my life when I needed to hear it. But hearing that expression at that moment in my life solidified my decision, like in that moment. It resonated so deeply with me because, I was almost there. I just needed that like final shove to push me over the edge, where I then made that decision to leave teaching and the stability of income and the benefits it provided. After all, if I didn't do it, if I didn't go after my dream, if I didn't write the books I wanted to write, well, who was going to do it? I went home and I wrote that expression on my first daily record journal, which is now filled with all the writing progress I accomplished in 2021. I have a current one I'm using for 2022, which I'm hoping I'm going to need 2 of these. So it says, if not you, then who? That journal was a product of the second major epiphany I had, thanks to, the perfect rerun of a Friends episode airing at like just the right time in my life, around that same time. So in an earlier blog post, I wrote about what I've now called Chandlerizing my life. So you can always go back to that and read that if you would like. But basically, I decided to model my daily writing life after the way in which Ross gets Chandler to accomplish the major and very daunting task of getting married. One little thing at a time. So I record every single day at least one thing I do to move my writing life forward. At first, it usually was just one small thing. But now I generally record 5, 6, many more things. And I do it every day. And that slow buildup of all those one small things has led to me publishing 2 more novels, getting my column in another newspaper, starting 2 newsletters, and doing many other things. This YouTube channel every single day that involve writing in some capacity, as well as marketing, sharing what I write. All of that since last May. Now, I compare this kind of to like in the days before everyone had GPS on their smartphones or in their vehicles. People would often like turn down the wrong road and just drive down it a ways before realizing they were on the wrong road. Now, depending on the circumstances, it might take a while before you were able to actually get yourself back onto the right path. But, you might end up seeing and learning some interesting things while you were traveling down the wrong road. And I think at about the age of 20, I headed down the wrong paths. And since I didn't have the clarity of some like overseeing GPS to guide me back where I should have been, I just stayed on those paths far too long until I found my way off of them eventually. I definitely saw and learned a lot of interesting and useful things while I was traveling down those wrong roads. But I am profoundly grateful to myself for finally steering my life onto better roads. I am happily divorced, but I prefer to think of myself as single and self-sufficient, even though I'm also involved in a committed relationship. I'm writing full-time, something I was never able to do that as a teacher. And even though I do not have the financial stability I had as a teacher, I do have emotional and mental stability now, which is worth far more to me at this age. 10 years ago, I chose to divorce. 1 year ago, I chose to leave teaching. Now, in both of those, I chose to put me first. That isn't something that comes easy for a woman, especially a mom and a teacher who has long been conditioned to think of others first and to feel guilty when she thinks of herself first. But that takes me back to the question of, if not you, then who? I spent years of my life supporting my ex, my children, and my students. It was my turn to support me and to go after my dreams. So that's what I'm doing now. If you're not doing that for yourself yet, well, I hope you will someday. And believe me, I am not sitting here advocating divorce and or career change. I'm advocating that you do what you need to do to go after your dreams before it's too late. This is the one that I have on the back of that first journal. And as you can see, dreams are kind of a big theme. And I have this one on the current one. Go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Live the life you've imagined, by Henry David Thoreau, who I very much admire. So, as I said, please check the comment section for some links to my author website for sure, and some other things. And thank you for joining me.